"Mom, you're a burden in this house." My daughter Ashley screamed that right at the dinner table, in front of my son-in-law and my 2 grandchildren. I was serving the homemade lasagna I'd spent 3 hours preparing when those words hit me like a slap. The ceramic serving spoon slipped from my trembling fingers and clattered against the dish. But I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just smiled. You know that moment when you realize the child you raised, fed, and sacrificed everything for sees you as nothing more than an inconvenience? That's exactly what I felt at 7:15 p.m. on that cold Tuesday evening. I slowly untied my floral apron, the same one I'd worn for 15 years while cooking every single meal in that house I helped them buy. My hands were steady as I folded it neatly and placed it on the counter. "You're absolutely right, Ashley," I said calmly. "Starting tomorrow morning, you'll discover exactly how much this burden contributes to your life." The next morning, I left a single envelope on the kitchen table before walking out. When Ashley opened it and saw what was inside, her face went completely white. And that was just the beginning. But let me back up and tell you how we got to this moment. How a woman who spent her entire life building up her family ended up being treated like a burden in her own home. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 64 years old, and I've been the invisible foundation of this family for longer than I care to admit. When my husband Robert died 9 years ago from a sudden heart attack, I could have sold this 4-bedroom house in the suburbs and moved to Florida like so many of my friends did. I could have traveled, dated again, lived the life I'd put on hold while raising Ashley as a single mother after Robert left us when she was 12. But Ashley was in trouble. She was 29, 6 months pregnant with James, and drowning in debt. The 2-bedroom apartment she and Matthew were renting in the city cost them $3,800 a month, and Matthew's salary as a veterinarian was barely covering their basic expenses. Student loans, credit card debt, doctor bills for the pregnancy. They were sinking fast. "Mom, I don't know what we're going to do," Ashley cried to me over the phone that rainy September afternoon. "The landlord's raising our rent to $4,200 starting in January. We can't afford it, but we can't afford to move either. The security deposits alone would wipe out our savings." My heart broke, hearing the desperation in my daughter's voice. This was the little girl I'd worked 3 jobs to put through dental school. The child I'd sacrificed everything for after her father walked out on us without a backward glance. The woman who'd struggled through 4 years of dental school and 2 years building her practice. "Come live here," I offered without hesitation. "The house is plenty big for all of us. You can save that rent money, I'll help with the baby, and we'll all be together." The relief in her voice was palpable. "Mom, are you sure? We don't want to be a burden." A burden. How ironic those words sound now. "Sweetheart, family is never a burden," I told her. "This house is too big for just me anyway. It'll be wonderful having a baby in the house again." And it was wonderful, at first. Those early years when James was little, then when Emily came along 2 years later, I felt more alive than I had since Robert's death. I had purpose again. While Ashley worked at her dental practice and Matthew built his veterinary clinic, I became the anchor that held everything together. I paid all the household bills without question. The electricity bill that averaged $285 a month with all of us living there. The water bill that jumped to $95 with baby baths and endless loads of laundry. The gas bill that hit $75 during those cold Indiana winters when we kept the house warm for the little ones. Property taxes of $420 monthly that I'd been paying on this house for 23 years. I handled the grocery shopping too, pushing my cart through the supermarket every Tuesday and Friday, spending at least $450 each week to feed a family of 5. I learned everyone's preferences. Matthew liked his coffee black and strong. Ashley was on one of those low-carb diets that seemed to change every month. James would only eat chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs. And Emily had a phase where she'd only eat things that were orange. I cooked every meal from scratch. Breakfast before everyone scattered to work and school, hearty dinners when they all came home tired and hungry. I kept the house spotless, did mountains of laundry, and best of all, I got to be grandma to those beautiful children. When James came home from school, I'd be there with milk and cookies, helping with homework at the kitchen table I'd bought 30 years ago. When Emily had nightmares, I was the one who'd rock her back to sleep, humming the same lullabies I'd sung to Ashley decades before. I attended every soccer game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference that Ashley and Matthew were too busy to make. I thought I was living the dream. Multi-generational living, family togetherness, being needed and useful. I felt like I was finally getting the chance to be the grandmother I'd always imagined I'd be. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. It started with small comments. "Mom, could you not season the chicken so much? Matthew doesn't like it that way. Mom, you're folding the towels wrong. I prefer them folded in thirds. Mom, the kids don't need a snack right when they get home from school. It ruins their appetite for dinner." At first, I brushed it off. Every household needs to find its rhythm, right? Ashley was the mother now, and she had her own way of doing things. I tried to adapt, to follow her lead. When she asked me to cook differently, I changed my recipes. When she wanted the laundry done a certain way, I learned her system. When she said the children didn't need something I'd offered, I stepped back. But the criticism grew more frequent, more pointed. I wasn't just doing things differently anymore. I was doing them wrong. According to Ashley, I was interfering, overstepping, not respecting her role as the mother. "This is my house now, Mom," became her favorite phrase whenever I tried to voice an opinion about anything. The house that I'd bought with 33 years of teaching salaries, the house where I'd raised her as a single mother, had somehow become hers in her mind. The first time she said it, I felt like I'd been slapped. We were discussing whether James was old enough to ride his bike to his friend's house 3 blocks away. I thought he was too young at 7 years old, but Ashley disagreed. "He's fine, Mom. You're being overprotective. I just worry about him on those busy streets," I said gently. "Maybe I could drive him?" "Mom, stop interfering. I make the decisions about my children. This is my house now, and I need you to respect that. My house. The house where I'd replaced the roof 2 years before they moved in, spending $12,000 of my retirement savings. The house where I'd renovated the kitchen 5 years earlier because the old cabinets were falling apart. The house where every mortgage payment had come from my teacher's salary for over 2 decades. But I swallowed my hurt and nodded. "Of course, sweetheart. You're their mother." I told myself she was just stressed, trying to establish her authority as a parent. It was natural for her to want to be the decision-maker in her children's lives. I could step back, be supportive without being intrusive. Except stepping back turned into being pushed out. When James started having trouble with math in 3rd grade, I offered to help him with his homework the way I'd helped hundreds of students during my teaching career. "Thanks, Mom, but I've got it handled," Ashley said briskly. "I've already arranged for a tutor." The tutor cost $60 an hour, 3 times a week. I could have helped him for free, with love and patience, but my offer was dismissed without consideration. When Emily wanted to learn to bake cookies, something I'd been looking forward to teaching her, Ashley stepped in again. "Maybe next year, sweetie. Grandma's kitchen is too messy for baking projects." My kitchen. Too messy. The kitchen where I'd baked Ashley's birthday cakes every year, where I'd taught her to make chocolate chip cookies when she was Emily's age. Gradually, I realized I was becoming less like a beloved grandmother and more like live-in help. The kind of help you criticize freely because, after all, they're not really employees, they're family, so they should just accept whatever treatment they get. "Mom, could you make sure dinner's ready by 6:30? Matthew has a conference call at 7? "Mom, the kids' laundry needs to be done today. Emily doesn't have any clean uniforms for school." "Mom, could you pick up my prescription? And while you're out, we need milk and bread." Never please, never thank you. Just expectations that I would handle whatever needed handling, like a personal assistant who happened to live in the guest bedroom. The guest bedroom. That stung too. After Robert died, I'd moved into the master bedroom, the room I'd shared with him for 15 years before he left. But when Ashley and Matthew moved in, she made it clear that the master bedroom should be theirs. "It makes more sense, Mom. We need the bigger closet for our clothes, and the bathroom is better for getting ready for work." So I moved into what had been Ashley's childhood bedroom, now redecorated as a guest room. In my own house, I became the guest. The financial arrangements were never discussed openly, which should have been my first red flag. I continued paying all the household expenses because, Well, I always had. Ashley and Matthew never offered to contribute to the utilities, the property taxes, the maintenance costs. They never even offered to pay for groceries, despite both of them having professional careers and good incomes. I told myself it was fair. They were saving money by living with me, which helped them pay down their debts and build their practices. I was happy to help. Family helps family, right? But when their financial situation improved, when Matthew's veterinary clinic started thriving and Ashley's dental practice grew busier, the contributions to household expenses never materialized. Instead, I watched them buy new cars, take vacations, and upgrade their wardrobes while I continued covering all the basic costs of running the household. The breaking point started building about a year ago when I discovered something that shook me to my core. I was organizing papers in the kitchen drawer when I found a letter from the bank that had been tucked behind some takeout menus. The envelope was addressed to me, but it had been opened. Curious, I pulled out the letter and felt my blood turn cold. Ashley had taken out a home equity loan against my house, $195,000, using my house as collateral. My name was on all the documents as the homeowner and guarantor, but I had never signed anything. I had never even been told about it. My hands shook as I read through the paperwork. The loan was supposedly for home improvements and debt consolidation, but I hadn't seen any home improvements. And if they were consolidating debt, why hadn't their lifestyle expenses decreased? When Ashley came home from work that evening, I was waiting at the kitchen table with the papers spread out in front of me. "Ashley, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She took one look at the papers, and her face went pale, then flushed red with anger. "You went through my mail?" "Your mail. This letter is addressed to me. About my house." "Mom, you don't understand these things. It's complicated." "Then explain it to me. Explain how my house became collateral for a loan I didn't know existed." Ashley sat down heavily, suddenly looking exhausted. "The practice needed capital, okay? We needed to upgrade equipment, hire another hygienist. The bank said it was just a formality, using the house as security. You weren't supposed to worry about it." "Weren't supposed to worry? Ashley, this is my house, my credit, my financial security. How could you not tell me?" "Because I knew you'd react like this. You don't understand business, Mom. Sometimes you have to take risks to make money." The casual dismissal of my intelligence, my right to know about my own property, hit me like a physical blow. I'd managed our household finances for decades, put Ashley through college and dental school, bought and maintained this house, but apparently I didn't understand business. "What happens if you can't pay it back?" I asked quietly. "We'll pay it back, Mom. Don't be so negative." But looking at her face, at the defensive set of her shoulders, I knew she wasn't as confident as she sounded. And that's when I realized I needed to start paying attention to things I'd been ignoring. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing details that had escaped me before. The stack of unopened bills that Ashley would hastily shove into drawers when I walked into the room. The hushed phone conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered. The way Matthew had started working longer hours, coming home later and more stressed. I also started noticing how my grandchildren talked about money, and it broke my heart. "Grandma," James said to me one afternoon as I helped him with his science project, "is it true that you don't work?" "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Mom told her friend that you don't work. You just sit at home spending our food money." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This child, this precious boy I'd cared for since birth, had been told that his grandmother was lazy, a drain on the family resources. "I used to work, James. I was a teacher for 33 years before I retired." "Oh," he said, clearly processing this new information. "Mom makes it sound like you never had a job." That evening, I lay in my guest bedroom in my own house, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how my life had reached this point. How had I gone from being a hard-working professional, a devoted mother, a loving grandmother, to being seen as dead weight by my own daughter? The humiliation reached its peak at Emily's 8th birthday party 3 weeks ago. Ashley decided to throw a big celebration, inviting all of Emily's classmates and their parents, plus our neighbors and family friends. She hired a party planner, rented tables and chairs, ordered a custom cake from an expensive bakery, and had the whole backyard decorated with a princess theme. The party cost $9,500. I know because I accidentally saw the invoice when Ashley left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. $9,500 for a child's birthday party, while I continued paying all the household expenses. During the party, I tried to help serve the food, to be useful, to participate in celebrating my granddaughter. But every time I approached the serving table, Ashley would intercept me. "Mom, I've got this handled. Mom, you don't need to worry about the drinks. Mom, let me cut the cake. You always make such a mess." I felt like a stranger at my own granddaughter's party in my own backyard. The worst moment came when I overheard Ashley talking to some of her friends near the gift table. They were asking about me, wondering how long I'd been living with them. "Oh, that's my mom," Ashley said with a wave of her hand, like she was discussing an inconvenient piece of furniture. "She lives here because she doesn't have anywhere else to go. We're taking care of her. Taking care of me. As if I were some helpless old woman they'd graciously taken in out of charity. As if I weren't the one paying for the electricity that kept the lights on, the water that filled the swimming pool for the party, the property taxes that allowed us to live in this nice neighborhood where Emily could have such elaborate birthday parties. I spent the rest of the party in my bedroom, claiming I had a headache. But what I really had was a broken heart and a growing sense that something fundamental needed to change. The final straw came last Tuesday, exactly 1 week ago, on the evening that changed everything. I'd spent the day taking care of Emily, who'd come down with a fever and couldn't go to school. I'd given her medicine, made her soup, read her stories, and kept her comfortable while Ashley was at work and Matthew was at the clinic. By evening, Emily was feeling better, but I was exhausted. I was making dinner, that lasagna I'd spent 3 hours preparing from scratch, when Ashley came home from work in a foul mood. One of her patients had been difficult. She'd had a disagreement with her dental hygienist, and traffic had been terrible on the way home. She walked into the kitchen, took one look at the dishes in the sink from my day of caring for her sick daughter, and exploded. "God, Mom, look at this mess. How hard is it to clean up after yourself?" I looked up from where I was layering the final cheese on the lasagna. I was taking care of Emily all day. She had a fever of 102 this morning. That's not an excuse for leaving the kitchen like a disaster zone. And what is this? She gestured at the lasagna like it was something offensive. We had Italian food 3 days ago. Don't you know how to cook anything else? I felt my patience, already thin from a day of caring for a sick child, begin to fray. "I can certainly make something else if you prefer. What would you like?" "I'd like you to think about what you're making before you just throw together whatever's convenient. And I'd like to come home to a clean kitchen once in a while. Is that too much to ask?" The unfairness of it hit me like a slap. Here I was, 64 years old, spending my retirement caring for her children and her household while she worked at a job she loved, and she was criticizing me for having dishes in the sink. "Ashley, I've been taking care of your daughter all day. She's been sick and needed constant attention. The dishes can wait." "My daughter? She's your granddaughter, Mom. You act like babysitting her is some huge favor you're doing for us." Babysitting. As if loving and caring for Emily was just a job, not something I did with joy and devotion. "I don't consider caring for Emily babysitting," I said quietly. "I consider it spending time with my granddaughter." "Well, maybe you could spend some of that time teaching her to clean up after herself instead of just letting her make messes everywhere." That's when Matthew walked in, followed by James, and we all sat down to dinner. Ashley was still radiating anger. Matthew was clearly trying to stay out of whatever was happening, and the children were picking up on the tension. I served the lasagna, trying to smooth over the mood, trying to salvage what should have been a pleasant family dinner. And that's when Ashley looked across the table at me, with my grandchildren watching, and said the words that changed everything. "Mom, you're dead weight in this house. You don't help with anything. You just spend our money and get in the way." Dead weight. I set down the serving spoon and looked at this woman I'd raised, this daughter I'd sacrificed everything for, and I saw a stranger. Someone who could look at all I did for this family, the bills I paid, the children I cared for, the meals I cooked, the love I gave freely, and call it dead weight. Matthew sat there in silence, not defending me, not contradicting her, just looking uncomfortable and wishing he were anywhere else. James stared down at his plate, and little Emily looked between her mother and me with confusion and worry. In that moment, something inside me clicked into place. A decision made itself, clear and final, and surprisingly peaceful. I folded my apron carefully, set it on the counter, and smiled at my daughter. "You're absolutely right, Ashley. Starting tomorrow morning, you're going to discover exactly how much this dead weight contributes to your life." And then I walked upstairs to my guest bedroom in my own house and began planning exactly how to show my daughter the true weight of everything she was about to lose. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you love treats you like you don't matter? Where your contributions are invisible until they're gone? I'd love to hear in the comments what you would do in my place, because what I did next turned our entire family upside down. I didn't sleep much that night. How could I? My mind was racing with plans, with questions that needed answers, with a growing suspicion that Ashley's financial problems ran much deeper than a simple business loan. At 5:30 a.m., while the rest of the house was still asleep, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. If I was going to show Ashley exactly what this dead weight contributed to her life, I needed to document everything, every bill, every expense, every service I provided that she took for granted. The first list was easy, the monthly bills I'd been paying without question. Electricity, $285 average, water and sewage, $95, natural gas, $75, property taxes, $420 home-ins, $39,360 a year that I contributed to keeping their lives comfortable and stable. But that was just the beginning. There were all the services I provided for free that they'd have to pay for if I wasn't there. Childcare after school and during breaks, estimated $800 monthly housekeeping, estimated $600. I stared at the numbers on my notepad, feeling a mixture of shock and vindication. $65,160. That's how much this dead weight contributed to their household every single year. But I had a feeling there was more to discover about their financial situation. That home equity loan Ashley had taken out without telling me, it nagged at me like a splinter. Why would she need $195,000 if her dental practice was doing as well as she claimed? I decided it was time to do some investigating. My first stop was the bank at 9 a.m. "I need to check on the status of this loan," I told the loan officer, a young woman named Jennifer who couldn't have been much older than Ashley. She pulled up the account on her computer, and I watched her face change from professional politeness to concern. "Mrs. Collins, are you aware that this account is currently 3 months behind on payments?" My stomach dropped. 3 months? "Yes, ma'am. The last payment we received was in August. The account is currently in default, and we've been trying to contact you about setting up a payment plan." 3 months. Ashley had been lying to me for 3 months, letting me believe everything was fine while my credit was being destroyed and my house was at risk. "What happens now?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. "Well, since this is a home equity loan secured by your property, the bank has the right to begin foreclosure proceedings if we can't work out a payment arrangement. The total amount currently due, including late fees and interest, is $47,850. I felt dizzy. Nearly $50,000 in missed payments, and Ashley had... Jennifer printed out a thick stack of papers, and I sat in my car in the bank parking lot, reading through them with growing horror. Ashley hadn't just forged my signature on the loan application. She'd also listed my retirement account as additional collateral. My teacher's pension, the money I'd worked 33 years to earn, was on the line for a loan I'd never agreed to. But that wasn't the worst part. The loan application showed that Ashley had claimed my monthly income was $6,200, nearly double what I actually received from Social Security and my pension. She'd inflated. How could my own daughter have done this to me? How could she have put my house, my retirement, my entire financial future at risk without even telling me? But I wasn't done investigating. If Ashley could lie about this, what else was she hiding? I spent the next 3 days playing detective in my own home. While Ashley was at work and the kids were at school, I went through every piece of paper I could find. Bank statements, credit card bills, insurance forms, anything that might give me a clearer picture of their real financial situation. What I found made my blood run cold. Ashley's dental practice wasn't thriving. It was failing. Badly. The bank statements from her business account showed a pattern of declining income over the past 18 months. Several large payments to medical supply companies had bounced. Her malpractice insurance was 3 months behind, and there was a letter from her landlord threatening eviction from her office space if she didn't catch up on $12,000 in back rent. The monthly payments on equipment financing alone came to over $8,000, and his patient load wasn't generating enough revenue to cover the costs. But the most shocking discovery came why. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, spa treatments, luxury vacations. Ashley had been living like she was wealthy while drowning in debt. That princess birthday party for Emily that cost they owed close to $500,000 when you added up the business loans, equipment financing, credit cards, and the home equity loan against my house. Their combined income couldn't even. That's when I understood why Ashley had been so dismissive of my contributions, so critical of everything I did. She wasn't just ungrateful, she was terrified. Terrified that if I realized how bad their situation was, I might stop supporting them. Terrified that if I discovered the truth about the loan, I might kick them out. So she'd chosen to make me feel worthless instead, to convince me that I needed them more than they needed me. It was manipulation at its finest, and it had been working perfectly until she pushed too far. But I still wasn't done investigating. There was one more conversation I needed to have, with someone who might give me the whole truth. I called Matthew's brother David, who lived about an hour away in Indianapolis. David and I had always gotten along well, and I suspected he might know more about their financial troubles than he'd let on. "Hi, David. It's Margaret. I was wondering if you might have some time to talk. There are some things happening with Ashley and Matthew that I'm trying to understand." There was a long pause. "What kind of things, Margaret?" "Money things. I've discovered some loans I didn't know about, and I'm worried there might be more I don't know." Another pause, longer this time. "Can you meet me for coffee? There are some things you should probably know, but I don't want to discuss them over the phone." We met at a small diner halfway between our houses, and David's face was grim as he slid into the booth across from me. "Margaret, I've been hoping someone would have this conversation with you. Matt's been confiding in me for months, and I've been worried sick about the whole situation." "Tell me everything," I said simply. David took a deep breath. "The dental practice has been losing money for over a year. Ashley made some bad decisions, hired too many people too fast, took on expensive equipment loans she couldn't afford, tried to expand to a second location before the first one was profitable. She's been borrowing money to meet payroll. And Matthew's clinic? Same story. He wanted to be the fanciest veterinary practice in town, so he bought all this high-tech equipment on credit. Digital X-ray machines, surgical lasers, the works. Problem is, most pet owners don't want to pay premium prices for premium care. They just want affordable basic veterinary services. I felt sick. How much do they owe altogether? Close to $500,000, from what Matt's told me. Maybe more now. They've been robbing Peter to pay Paul for months, taking cash advances on credit cards to make loan payments, borrowing from one account to cover overdrafts in another. Why didn't anyone tell me? David looked uncomfortable. Matt wanted to, but Ashley insisted they could handle it themselves. She was convinced they just needed time for the businesses to turn around. And honestly, Margaret, they've been leaning on you pretty heavily. All the household expenses, child care, the stability of living in your house. Without that support, they would have lost everything months ago. So I was subsidizing their fantasy that they could spend their way out of debt. Pretty much, yeah. And Ashley... Look, I love my brother, but Ashley's got some serious pride issues. She can't stand the idea of admitting failure, especially to you. She's been trying so hard to prove she's successful that she's made everything worse. David, there's something else. Ashley took out a home equity loan against my house without telling me. It's in default. His face went pale. Oh, God. Margaret, I didn't know about that. Matt never mentioned it. So Matthew doesn't know either. I don't think so. He would have told me something that serious. Ashley must have done that on her own. That revelation hit me like a truck. Not only had Ashley forged my signature and stolen my identity to get the loan, She'd hidden it from her own husband. The level of deception was staggering. "David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you think they can ever pay all this back?" He was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee absently. "Margaret, I think they're too far gone. Even if both practices started making money tomorrow, the debt service alone would eat up most of their profits. And honestly, I don't see the practices turning around anytime soon. Ashley's lost several key patients due to billing disputes, and Matt's been talking about having to lay off his assistant. So what's their plan? I don't think they have one beyond hoping you'll continue covering their living expenses while they figure something out, which could take years, if it ever happens at all." I thanked David for his honesty and drove home with my head spinning. Everything I'd suspected was true, and worse than I'd imagined. Ashley and Matthew weren't just struggling, they were financially destroyed. And they'd been planning to hide in my house, living off my retirement income, while they slowly dragged me down with them. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about honesty, about basic respect. Ashley had looked me in the eye every day for months while secretly destroying my financial security. That evening, I sat down with all the evidence I'd gathered and made a decision. It was time to confront Ashley with the truth, but I wasn't going to do it alone. I called my lawyer, Robert Harrison, who'd handled my estate planning after my husband died. I explained the situation and made an appointment to see him first thing in the morning. "Margaret," he said when I finished explaining everything, "what Ashley did constitutes identity theft and fraud. The fact that she forged your signature on loan documents using your house as collateral, that's a serious crime. I don't want to put my daughter in jail," I said quickly, "but I need to protect myself." "I understand. Let me look into this and see what options we have. In the meantime, don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and document every conversation you have with them about money." The next evening, I was ready. I'd made copies of all the financial documents, organized them in chronological order, and prepared for the most difficult conversation of my life. Ashley came home from work around 6:30, looking tired and stressed as usual. Matthew arrived about 20 minutes later, and the kids were upstairs doing homework. "Ashley, Matthew, I need to talk to both of you," I said, gesturing toward the dining room table where I'd laid out all the paperwork. "Now." The color drained from Ashley's face when she saw the bank statements, credit card bills, and loan documents spread across the table. "Mom, where did you get those?" "They were in my house, regarding my finances and my property." "The better question is why you thought you could hide $500,000 in debt from me while I've been paying all your living expenses." Matthew looked genuinely confused. "What are you talking?" "Ashley, what is this?" "It was supposed to be temporary," Ashley said defensively, "just until the practice turned around." "You forged my signature," I said quietly. "You committed identity theft against your own mother." "I didn't forge anything. I had power of attorney." "No, Ashley, you don't. We never executed any power of attorney documents." The room went dead silent. Matthew was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Ashley was looking trapped, desperate, caught in a web of lies that was finally collapsing. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm and steady, despite the storm raging in my heart. "Tomorrow morning, I'm listing this house for rent at market rate. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live." "Mom, you can't be serious," Ashley whispered. "I'm completely serious. I've enabled this long enough. You called me dead weight? Fine. Starting tomorrow, you're going to find out exactly how much this dead weight was carrying." And with that, I stood up and walked upstairs, leaving them to contemplate the wreckage of their financial lies and the reality that their safety net was about to disappear. What would you do if you discovered your own child had been lying to you and stealing from you while you were supporting their entire family? Tell me in the comments, because what happened next shocked even me. I woke up the next morning to the sound of hushed, frantic voices downstairs. It was 6 a.m., and through my bedroom door I could hear Ashley and Matthew having what sounded like their first completely honest conversation about money in years. I got dressed slowly, deliberately, and made my way downstairs. They were sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, calculator in hand, both looking like they'd been hit by a truck. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Ashley looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Mom, we need to talk. We stayed up all night going through everything." "I'm listening," I said, sitting down across from them. Matthew cleared his throat. "Margaret, I owe you a huge apology. I had no idea about the home equity loan. Ashley told me she'd discussed it with you and that you'd agreed to it." I looked at my daughter. "Is that what you told him?" Ashley's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes. So you lied to him too." "I was trying to protect everyone," Ashley said, tears starting to fall. "I thought if I could just get the practice back on track, I could pay everything back before anyone got hurt." "Ashley, my R." I did the math in my head. "That leaves you $500 a month for everything else. Food, gas, clothing, unexpected expenses." "It's impossible," Ashley admitted. "We can't make it work." I took a sip of my coffee, feeling calmer than I had in months. The truth was finally out in the open, and somehow that made everything clearer. "You're right. It is impossible. Which is why I meant what I said last night. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live." "Mom, please," Ashley begged. "Where are we supposed to go? Who's going to rent to us with our credit scores? How are we going to afford first month, last month, and a security deposit? You should have thought about that before you forged my signature and put my house at risk." Matthew leaned forward. "Margaret, what if we could work something out? Some kind of payment plan or arrangement?" I looked at this man who'd sat silently while his wife called me dead weight, who'd never once defended me or acknowledged what I contributed to their lives. "Matthew, where were you last Tuesday night when Ashley was screaming at me? When she called me dead weight in front of my grandchildren?" His face flushed red. "I should have said something. I should have defended you. I was wrong to stay silent." "Yes, you were. But more than that, you've been complicit in this whole situation. You've lived in my house for 5 years, eating food I paid for, using utilities I covered, benefiting from childcare I provided for free, and you never once offered to contribute or even said thank you." "You're right," he said quietly. "We've taken advantage of your generosity." "It wasn't generosity, Matthew. It was love. I loved my family and wanted to help. But love without respect becomes exploitation. And that's what this turned into." I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter where I'd prepared something the night before. A manila envelope containing documents I'd had my lawyer prepare. "However," I said, sitting back down, "I'm not completely heartless. I have one offer to make, and it's non-negotiable." Ashley and Matthew exchanged glances, hope flickering in their eyes. I opened the envelope and spread out 3 documents. "First, this is a promissory note for the home equity loan. Ashley will sign over complete responsibility for the $195,000 debt, removing my name and my house from any EUE. But how will I qualify for a loan this size with our credit? That's your problem to solve. But until you do, my house remains at risk, which means you remain homeless." Matthew was reading the SECO. "Then you can't afford to live here. But that's still not all." I picked up the 3rd document. "This is an agreement for family counseling. Mandatory sessions twice a month for at least 6 months, with a counselor who specializes in family financial issues and boundaries." "Mom, we don't need—" "Yes, Ashley, you do. We all do. What happened here isn't just about money. It's about respect, honesty, and how this family treats each other. If we're going to live under the same roof, we're going to learn to do it in a healthy way." I sat back and looked at both of them. "Those are my terms. All 3 conditions must be met, or you move out in 30 days. Non-negotiable." Ashley was crying now, really crying. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but please don't throw us out. Please don't separate us from the kids." For a moment, my resolve wavered. This was still my daughter, my little girl who used to crawl into my lap when she had bad dreams. But then I remembered the contempt in her voice when she called me dead weight, the months of deception, the casual way she'd put my entire future at risk. "Ashley, I'm not throwing you out because I don't love you. I'm setting boundaries because I do love you. What you've been doing isn't sustainable, and enabling it isn't helping anyone." Over the next week, I watched my family scramble to adjust to the new reality. Ashley spent hours on the phone with the bank, trying to negotiate taking full responsibility for the home equity loan. Matthew started looking into bankruptcy attorneys. Both of them began the humbling process of apartment hunting with destroyed credit. The effect on James and Emily was immediate and profound. With their parents suddenly busy with real-world problems instead of maintaining appearances, they turned to me for stability. But this time, it felt different. They weren't just seeking out Grandma because their parents were too busy. They were seeking comfort because their whole world felt uncertain. "Grandma," Emily asked me one afternoon as I helped her with homework, "are we going to have to move?" "I don't know, sweetheart. That depends on your parents. James says we might have to live in an apartment. Would that be so terrible?" She considered this seriously. "I guess not. But I like living here with you." "I like living with you too, Emily. But sometimes families need to make changes." James was older and understood more of what was happening. He found me in the garden on Saturday morning, clearly wanting to talk. "Grandma, is it true that Mom owes a lot of money?" I sat back on my heels, considering how much truth a 13-year-old could handle. "Your parents have some financial problems they need to work out. Is it our fault? Like, because we cost too much money?" My heart broke for this child who was trying to make sense of an adult situation. "Oh, sweetheart, no, none of this is your fault. Parents are supposed to take care of their children, and sometimes they make decisions that don't work out the way they planned. Mom seems really scared." "She is scared. Change is scary, even when it's necessary." "Are you going to make us move out?" I put my muddy gardening gloves on his shoulders. "James, I love you and Emily more than anything in this world. Whatever happens with the house, that will never change. I will always be your grandmother, and I will always be here for you." He hugged me then, tight and desperate, and I realized that my grandchildren were casualties in this mess too. They hadn't asked for any of this, but they were the ones who would pay the price if their parents couldn't figure out how to be honest, responsible adults. That weekend brought a breakthrough, though not the kind I was expecting. Matthew came to me Saturday evening while Ashley was giving the kids their baths upstairs. "Margaret, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond." I set down my book and looked at him. "I'm listening. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I realize I've been a coward. Not just about defending you to Ashley, but about our whole situation. I've known for months that we were in trouble, but I let Ashley convince me we could handle it ourselves." "Why?" He sat down heavily in the armchair across from me. "Because it was easier than facing the truth. Easier to let you carry the load while we pretended everything was fine. And honestly, because Ashley has this way of making you feel like questioning her means you don't trust her or believe in her." I thought about this. Ashley had always been strong-willed, even as a child. But somewhere along the way, strong-willed had become manipulative. "Matthew, what do you want to do?" "I want to accept your terms. All of them. The lease, the counseling, taking responsibility for the loan. But I also want to do something else." "What?" "I want to declare bankruptcy. Not just personally, but for both businesses. We're never going to be able to dig out of this debt, and trying to do it is just making everything worse." This surprised me. "Have you discussed this with Ashley?" "I've tried. She sees bankruptcy as admitting failure. But Margaret, we've already failed. We failed months ago. Now we're just prolonging the pain and dragging other people down with us. What would bankruptcy mean for you practically? We'd lose the businesses, obviously, but we'd also lose most of the debt. We could start over, maybe find jobs working for other people instead of trying to be business owners. It would be humbling, but it would also be honest." I studied Matthew's face. For the first time in years, he looked like a man instead of a scared boy pretending to be successful. "What does Ashley say about this?" "She says I'm giving up too easily, that we just need more time, maybe another loan to consolidate everything." "Matthew, there is no more time, and there shouldn't be another loan. You can't borrow your way out of debt." "I know that now. The question is whether Ashley can accept it." That conversation with Matthew changed something fundamental in how I viewed the situation. He wasn't just a passive participant anymore. He was taking responsibility and making hard decisions. For the first time, I felt like there might be hope for rebuilding our family relationships on a foundation of honesty instead of denial. But Ashley wasn't ready to give up the fight. The next Tuesday, exactly 1 week after she'd called me dead weight, Ashley came home with news. "Mom, I found a solution," she announced, walking into the kitchen with more energy than I'd seen from her in months. "What kind of solution?" "I talked to Dr. Richards. You remember, he's the oral surgeon who shares office space with me. He's offered to buy into my practice. He'll pay off all the business debts and give me a 40% ownership stake. I'll work as an associate for him, and over time, I can buy back majority ownership." I looked at her carefully. "Ashley, what aren't you telling me? What do you mean? You're describing a deal that's almost too good to be true. What's the catch?" Her excitement dimmed slightly. "He wants me to sign a 10-year contract, and the buyback option doesn't kick in until year 7. So you'd essentially be an employee in your own practice for 7 years. It's not that simple, Mom. I'd still have input on major decisions, still be building equity." "Ashley, stop. What does Matthew think about this? He thinks I should just declare bankruptcy and give up. He doesn't understand that this could save everything." I sat down at the kitchen table. "Ashley, sit down. We need to have a real conversation." She remained standing, arms crossed defensively. "Sweetheart, what you're describing isn't a solution. It's another way of avoiding the problem. You'd be trading your independence and majority control of your practice to avoid admitting that you made mistakes." "I'm trying to save my business." "No, you're trying to save your pride. And in the process, you're about to make a deal that will leave you worse off than bankruptcy would. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You're so terrified of being seen as a failure that you're willing to become Dr. Richard's employee rather than admit you tried something and it didn't work out." Ashley finally sat down, deflated. "It feels like giving up." "Ashley, sometimes what feels like giving up is actually growing up. Adults make mistakes, learn from them, and adjust their approach. What you've been doing isn't adult behavior, it's child behavior." We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Ashley spoke in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear her. "I wanted to prove to you that I could be successful on my own, that I didn't need you to take care of me anymore." And there it was, the heart of everything that had gone wrong. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You never needed to prove that to me. I was already proud of you. But I messed everything up. The practice, our finances, our relationship. I called you dead weight." Fresh tears started flowing. "Mom, you're the strongest person I know, and I treated you like you were worthless." "Ashley, you are not worthless. You made some bad decisions, but that doesn't make you a bad person. How can you forgive me? How can you even stand to look at me after what I did?" I thought about that question seriously. Because you're my daughter, and because I see now that your behavior came from fear, not malice. You were drowning, and you lashed out at the person trying to save you. So what do I do now? You accept that the business is over. You file for bankruptcy. You take responsibility for the home equity loan. You pay rent to live in this house. You go to counseling, and you start over with honesty instead of pride. Ashley nodded slowly. "And if I do all that, we can live here? If you do all that, we can try to rebuild our relationship. The house is just where we sleep, Ashley. What matters is whether we can learn to treat each other with love and respect." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal paperwork, difficult conversations, and gradual change. Ashley and Matthew filed for bankruptcy, which meant losing both businesses, but also eliminating most of their debt. Matthew found a job as an associate veterinarian at a large animal hospital, earning less money, but also carrying less stress. Ashley took a position with a dental group, working as an employee instead of a business owner. The transition wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, arguments about money and responsibilities, and times when I wondered if I'd made the right decision. But slowly, gradually, our family dynamic began to shift. The first real breakthrough came during our second counseling session. Dr. Patricia Chen, our therapist, had given us an assignment to write letters to each other expressing our feelings about the past year. Ashley's letter to me was 3 pages long and tear-stained. She wrote about feeling overwhelmed by trying to be perfect, about being terrified that I would think less of her if I knew how badly she was failing, about how she'd convinced herself that criticizing me was a way of asserting her independence rather than admitting her dependence. My letter to her was shorter, but equally emotional. I wrote about feeling invisible and taken for granted, about how much it hurt to have my contributions dismissed, but also about how proud I was of her willingness to face the truth and start over. Matthew's letter surprised me most of all. He wrote about feeling caught between his loyalty to his wife and his respect for me, about how he'd been raised to believe that men should be providers, and how ashamed he felt about needing my help, about how he'd stayed silent not because he agreed with Ashley's treatment of me, but because he didn't know how to navigate the conflict. Those letters became the foundation for a new kind of honesty in our family. Christmas that year was unlike any we'd had before. Instead of expensive gifts and elaborate celebrations, we focused on simple traditions. I taught Emily how to make sugar cookies from my grandmother's recipe. James and I built a bird feeder for the backyard. Ashley and Matthew took turns reading The Night Before Christmas to the children, a tradition that had been abandoned during their years of financial stress. On Christmas morning, Ashley gave me a small wrapped package. Inside was a simple ceramic mug with "World's Greatest Mom" written in Emily's 8-year-old handwriting. "Emily made it at school," Ashley explained, "but the words were my idea. I wanted you to have something that told the truth about who you are in this family." I cried as I held that mug, not because it was expensive or elaborate, but because it represented something I'd thought was lost forever: my daughter's respect and gratitude. The financial arrangements we'd set up were working better than I'd expected. Ashley and Matthew were paying the $2,200 monthly rent consistently, and they'd managed to negotiate. Ashley started saying please and thank you for things I did around the house. Matthew began contributing to household chores without being asked. The children felt the difference too. Less tension, more laughter, more genuine family time. 6 months after that terrible Tuesday when Ashley called me dead weight, we had a family meeting that felt like a celebration. "I have an announcement," Matthew said, looking nervous but excited. "I've been offered a partnership at the animal hospital where I work. It would mean more responsibility and better pay." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for him. Ashley smiled at her husband with pride I hadn't seen in years. "He's been working so hard, learning from the senior partners instead of trying to compete with them." "What does this mean for our living situation?" I asked. Matthew and Ashley exchanged glances. "We've been talking about that," Ashley said. "We could probably afford our own place now, a nice apartment, or maybe even a small house. But we don't want to move," Matthew added quickly. "If you'll have us, we'd like to stay here. This feels like home now, but the real kind of home where people take care of each other." I looked around the table at these people I loved so much, this family that had been broken and was slowly healing itself. "I'd like that too," I said, "but I have one condition." They waited, probably expecting another rule or requirement. "I want to lower your rent. If Matthew's making more money and you're both stable in your jobs, I think $1,800. That evening, as I sat in the living room watching Matthew help James with algebra while Ashley braided Emily's hair for school the next day, I reflected on everything that had changed. I wasn't dead weight after all. I was the foundation. Not because I paid the bills or provided services, but because I'd loved this family enough to insist on honesty and respect. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices so they can learn and grow. Ashley came over and sat beside me on the couch. "Mom, I need to tell you something." "What's that, sweetheart?" "I used to think being an adult meant not needing anybody. I thought independence meant doing everything yourself and never asking for help. And now? Now I think being an adult means knowing the difference between interdependence and exploitation. It means contributing to relationships instead of just taking from them. It means being grateful for the people who love you enough to call you on your mistakes." She leaned against my shoulder, the way she used to when she was small. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." I kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for learning to see me as a person instead of just a resource." Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different than she had a year ago. More confident, more at peace, more like someone who knew her own worth. I wasn't dead weight. I never had been. I was Margaret Collins, retired teacher, loving mother, devoted grandmother, and the foundation that had held this family together even when they couldn't see it. And tomorrow, I would wake up in my own house, surrounded by a family that finally understood the difference between love and exploitation, between interdependence and taking advantage. For the first time in years, that felt like exactly where I belonged. If this story touched your heart, if you've lived through something similar or know someone who's been taken for granted by their own family, leave your comment telling me where you're watching from and what you felt reading this. Share this story with someone who needs to know that it's never too late to demand respect and set healthy boundaries, even with the people you love most. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more real stories of people who found the strength to change their lives, and click now on the story appearing on your screen. Because every story of pain can transform into a story of victory when we learn to value ourselves as much as we value others.